the SmallmouthCrush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the SmallmouthCrush podcast, Travis Manson.
Hello, welcome to the SmallmouthCrush podcast. My name is Travis Manson. Well, we've heard a lot of amazing anglers come across this podcast as well on the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush, for all the viewers that are watching this on their computers or cell phones or whatever the case may be. But we're also on all the major podcasting platforms that are out there. I don't know which ones. There's so many. It's confusing. Spotify, Apple, Tunes, whatever it's called. You get the point. You know what's up. We're talking smallmouth bass, talking with some of the top smallmouth bass anglers across North America, because you got to include Canada. For some reason, it's like, I think every Canadian's like a top smallmouth angler. I don't know. It's crazy. We have so many good Canadian anglers out there. And really, the Great Lakes, some of the inland lakes that are up there, just amazing. If you have never been up in that area and you're a bass angler, I don't care if you're a hardcore largemouth guy from Florida, you need to get your butt up here and experience some of the amazing fishing that's out there, that the Great Lakes, the St. Lawrence River, and all these big inland bodies of water provide. Definitely put that on your bucket list. But we're going to definitely talk some smallmouth fishing with tonight's guest. Super excited. Dude knows how to catch them. Curtis Richardson will be joining us shortly. But before we get there, we got to talk about the Reel Shot. Of course, the Reel Shot's quickly becoming the go-to shop for bass anglers across the country, with a vast selection of some of the most who? I shouldn't even read from the script. Just head on over to the Reel Shot. Use my code SmallmouthCrush15. Get 15% off your first order. All the top brands: Mega Bass, Jackal, Z-Man, staple brands like Berkeley, VMC, Rapala. They got it all. Huge selection of rods and reels. And they know how to cater to the bass angler. And, of course, every time you purchase from the Reel Shot, you help out this podcast. Plus, you get 15% off. So head on over and tell them Smallmouth Crush sent you. And that's it. Let's get into it. Let's bring him aboard. Curtis, what's going on, man? Talking big smallmouth, dude. I know you know how to bring them in. Fish a lot of big tournaments up on Lake Ontario, St. Lawrence River, pretty much all over up there. For viewers and listeners that may not be familiar with yourself, Curtis, can you just give us a quick background, a little bit about yourself, what you've been up to, and maybe some of your future plans here when it comes to bass fishing?
Yeah, I fishing tournament when I was 12 years old, just team stuff around the house. Fell in love with it obviously at a young age, and just fished as, entered as many tournaments as I could. Eventually worked my way up. A few years ago, I guess 2014, I decided to join some clubs after fishing. So I already did some opens and some coasters and stuff like that. But got talking to join a club to try to get through the TBF side of things. Ended up going all the way to national championship and the All-American. I ended up actually winning the All-American. And then after that, that qualified me to fish the FLW Tour. So I went and fished the FLW Tour for 4 years. And that pretty much brings us to right now.
Yeah, man. So you won the All-American, like the big tournament, not just the regional to get there, but the actual where all the big sticks from across the country, as far as the BFL side of things. That had been pretty cool. I mean, that's a hell of a payday. And that's crazy, dude. Like, that's what everybody dreams of, that fishes at that local level, is to win that.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. I had a friend of mine who had, gone up to the TBF doing the club stuff and went to the nationals a few years. And he just talked to me today. He said, "Hey, there's kind of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Do join a club and see what happens." And luckily, my first year, I went all the way on the whole thing, so it worked out pretty good. I was lucky. The regional was at Clayton, Thousand Islands, Lake Ontario, so that kind of helped get me to nationals. Right, I won that, and and then the All-American was on Kentucky Lake in 2015. So Kentucky Lake was still, it was in June. So ledge fishing, which is so much like smallmouth fishing, which really gave me a huge advantage there, right? Because it's graphing and fishing deep structure. It's so much
is that what you relied on? A lot of graphing and stuff to find those fish?
Yeah, for the All-American, it was they only give you 1 day of actual practice. So you have to go before the cutoff, and I graphed, I think, 5 or 6 days, found a bunch of schools, and then kind of came back and had, fished as many waypoints as I could in that 1 day of practice, and then just kind of rolled with it. And yeah, I just caught all the fish, 20 to 25 foot deep, and just like smallmouth fishing, really, which was really nice.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What would be your home body of water, I guess, or the body of water that you are most familiar with or fish the most?
Well, I live right on the Bay of Quinte, which is up in Ontario, and it's just a big arm that comes off the top of Lake Ontario. It's full of largemouth. It's got some big smallmouth in it too. So that's kind of my home body of water, but I really consider Lake Ontario. I would say that's my home body of water.
Sure. Do you get the opportunity to go mess around with smallmouth in other parts of the country, or do you kind of focus on that right now?
Well, I do, when I was fishing the FLW tour, obviously I was traveling all around, so I got to fish smallmouth down at Pickwick, all over the place. We've been to Cumberland and lots of places, right, that have smallmouth down south. And then up here all summer long, I'm doing team tournaments, pro-am type tournaments up here all summer. So we're fishing a lot of smallmouth on, Great Lake, St. Lawrence, Lake Simcoe sometimes. Even though I'm not a huge fan of that place, but
you're not. Yeah,
a lot of the inland lakes, are phenomenal up here. You guys in the south think the Champlain is so good. I just think it's like an average lake for what we
sure. That's a good point. I got to pick your brain on this. Is there a lot of good fishing up your way on lakes that maybe don't have tournaments, that are just too small or not well known? There's got to be like a ton of them that are just amazing.
I couldn't even, within an hour of my house, I couldn't even count how many lakes we have.
Dang,
I have no idea. A couple hundred within an hour. I don't have no idea.
Wow.
So many I've never been on that. I heard guys go out and, somebody goes out and figures out there's a bunch of 7-pound largemouth in it. And that's kind of a hidden thing for a couple of years. And then, oh no, now it's this other lake. So
sure.
At least I've never even heard of that are 45 minutes from my house.
Yeah,
so
it's fascinating.
Little back lakes and smaller places that don't have tournaments, but a lot of the tournament lakes, I'm sure a lot of guys, especially in the northern U.S., have heard of. Rice Lake, Simcoe, those places that are somewhat famous for being good tournament lakes.
What's your favorite way to catch smallmouth? Whether it be techniques or presentation, or just kind of the general pattern. What do you love to do the most?
Probably deep drop shotting, getting on top of them, which, I mean, we all kind of know that's starting to go away slowly. On a lot of places, it's getting harder and harder. Those fish getting more pressured into the boats around them. It's getting harder to do that. Really deep structure fishing in general, whether I got to be on top of them or keep the boat off them. That's kind of what I like to do. I get really frustrated chasing some of those shallow ones around when they don't want to cooperate, sight fishing for those things. Yeah. Some days they're a little finicky and it can frustrate you, and you can see a 25+ pound bag just cruising all over the place and you can't catch one. It drives me insane. But probably the most fun thing, and guys don't really talk about it much, but a lot of our tournaments up here in the inland lakes are one flipping for smallmouth. Really? 8-foot weed lines, kind of the same. A lot of oil up here, so get on the weed lines and just 65-pound braid and a 1/2 ounce jig, 3/4 ounce jig. And that's how the jig and the jerkbait are how a lot of our inland lakes are won.
So you got a little bit of grass, and some of these smallmouth are holding on that outside edge, perhaps just kind of cruising around. Yeah, that's interesting. Flipping and braid.
It's pretty fun to lay the lumber to a 5-pound smallie on a short line like that with 65 braid. You just boat flip them. They pull a lot harder when you hit them than a largemouth does.
Dang, dude, that's pretty cool. That's something I mess with a little bit. I had a little experience on Oneida. We get to do that but I can imagine even some of those inland lakes that you were just talking about that are that don't have tournaments. I can imagine just going there and just having fun and fine tuning your techniques. I'm sure you do a lot of that as far as exploring different baits and stuff, especially on these bodies of water that don't see a lot of pressure. You can learn a lot doing that because you kind of have the lake to yourself. You have those fish to yourself, and you can see how they react to those baits. What's your number one bait of choice when you are flipping a grass edge for those smallmouth?
1/2 or 3/4 ounce jig.
Ah, okay.
Zoom dunk. That's
Basic.
small dunk is what I throw. Black. It's a black jig.
Straight black. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I like that style. Braid or was it fluorocarbon?
I've kind of gone back to the braid. I was a big fluorocarbon guy for years and years. I jumped on that train as soon as fluorocarbon came out, and I think I'm back to all braid now.
Are you?
Especially with the smallmouth because of how hard their mouths are, and I find that sometimes I don't think even flipping, 20, 25 pound fluorocarbon and a heavy rod. Sometimes I don't think you can penetrate their mouth. Their jaws are so strong. I think sometimes they just clamp down on that jig and it'll just whack them. And
sure,
they'll swim 3 feet and come off. And I don't think that hook ever got in them.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Now, are you a braid to fluoro on your spinning rods when we're talking Great Lakes and in deep water smallmouth as well?
Yeah, for some things, I think I probably use straight fluoro more than most guys. Definitely drop shotting. I will not use braid at all.
Why is that?
Drop shotting or a Ned rig. No, I'll be straight fluoro all the time.
Okay.
The biggest thing is, I mean, I've played with it obviously, and I've had a lot of breakoffs with the braid. And you've seen it. You catch, you're out in 30 foot of water. You set on one under the boat, and as soon as you hit him, he comes right up. Right, he jumps beside the boat, and then he's straight back to the bottom. Well, that braid, he'll snap as soon as he starts digging back, hits the water and goes back down. And I think that's because of the braid digging into the spool and not allowing your drag to do its thing, right? And I don't ever have that problem ever with fluorocarbon. So I just use 6 pound test gamma, which is really 8 pound test.
Yeah.
And I just tie a little tiny barrel swivel.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of the line twist and.
Yeah, you talked. I mean, that's interesting. You ask 100 smallmouth anglers, and you'll get so many different opinions when it comes to that. One thing that does resonate with me when you're talking drop shotting and Ned rigging, gamma, that is some pretty good line. It's hard to beat. Expensive, right? It's probably one of the more expensive lines out there. But there's something about it. Now, for those that want to investigate gamma, I certainly recommend it. I use it. But it's a little different as far as your diameters when you're comparing to some of the other lines on the market. You brought up a good point. 6 pound test really is 8 if you compare it to any of the other major brands that are out there. But there's something about that line. Abrasion resistance, holds knots very well. And in my opinion, it's one of the most underrated fluorocarbon lines out there, or maybe not well known or fished. I mean, those that know, but a lot of times the bigger brand that are in those box stores, people gravitate to those. And if you're looking for something a little different that might give you an edge, gamma's where I would certainly focus. So, yeah, I love it. I'm always been a fan of it.
Gamma either. So I used to be sponsored by them. I got free line, loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Lost that sponsorship years ago. Tried other stuff. It went back pretty quick.
Very good.
You're not using it.
Good testimonial about that. So deep water. So a lot of electronics, a lot of idle time, of course. I want to hear your thoughts. Like, how do you go and when you have a tournament coming up on the Great Lakes, you're going to gravitate, I guess, more towards the deep water bite than the shallow bite? Is that what you're focused on?
Yeah, 100%. I've
100%.
spent very little time shallow. I mean, I fished there so long, like Lake Ontario. there's not too many secrets out there anymore.
You just know. Yeah.
I know it. I'll run those places and see if, what's up, but I don't really care unless I have to. It's more like a plan
B or C. Yeah.
Something like that, right? I run as many deep schools as I can, and if something happens where I can't get to them, or I've run 6 schools and I can't get a bite out of any of them, then okay, I guess we're going shallow.
Yeah. And by that time, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, right? We've all been there. It's tough. I love a shallow bite. I know a lot of some of these successful guys that have been on the podcast focus a lot on the shallow deal. It's hard for me. It's fun when conditions are right, but it's hard for me to rely on a shallow bite, just me personally, because I can go deal with it if I know there's some fish, and let's say we have some clouds and waves, which is common on the Great Lakes. It kind of throws you for a loop if it's not ideal conditions. So as tournament tactics go, I shy away with that. And I'm in your boat, dude, when it comes to that deep water bite. I like trying to find a little bit of consistency, although things have been changing. The deep water bite, man, it's becoming more and more frustrating every year, it seems. And you're right. You can have the best game plan going into a tournament and get out there, and you look like a fool coming back to the weigh-in because you ain't got no fish, even though you've been on fish all week. It's so freaking crazy and frustrating what those fish will put you through out there. How do you combat that? Like, what's your game plan going in when you're fishing an event in a body of water that you're familiar with? You have your go-to spots, but are you looking for new areas during practice? And how often do you find like a new awesome area that's like, dang, this could have some potential?
I don't think I've found a new deep thing since 2013, 14.
It's hard.
There's not that many fish out there, to be honest. I mean, it seems like it when you find them. It seems like there's just an unlimited number of fish out there, but it's not like it used to be. It used to be 100 fish. Like you saw one on your graph, you caught it. Now, once you're there for a few minutes, the whole school scatters out on you. You can't catch the ones that are there, and the schools just aren't the same. There was like 200, 300, 400 fish schools. Now there's 30 fish schools.
It's interesting. You talk to people and they say every lake, every body of water has its cycles. I'm curious if we are going through a lower cycle when it comes to smallmouth, because of course the good thing is you can go up in that 15 to 20 foot range out on Lake Ontario and catch as many, 12 to 14 inches that you want, which I think is a good sign. But those big fish, they're old. Okay. And there is definitely cycles, and I don't know exactly what's going on out there. Maybe I just suck. Maybe it's a bad year for me as an angler, but it's been a little tough out there. We're seeing more and more, we've had some people on the podcast talking about some of the bigger charter boats and keeping fish. I think that's a problem. People not practicing catch and release, holding smallmouth in a live well, and then, to get that picture at the end of the day. All that I think adds up a little bit. And as a smallmouth angler that loves to catch them and compete, keeping those fish healthy and not over harvesting, I feel is really important in fish management. And it's to the point where you almost can't count on the different departments to regulate that, because it's a 5 fish bag limit for whoever wants to go out there. And they don't realize if you get on that 4.5, 5 pound school of smallmouth and you decide to throw them in your cooler, you're killing 10, 11, 12-year-old fish, 5 or 10 or how many's in your boat. It's pretty sad what's really going on. So fish care is important. I know you love those long runs out there on Lake Ontario and sometimes in big waves. What's your approach when, keeping fish alive is extremely important in tournaments, yet for someone who's just starting out in tournament fishing or maybe not familiar with the Great Lakes and how to manage those smallmouth, can you take a little bit of time and walk me through some of the steps and procedures you take to make sure those fish stay alive throughout the day and can be released back to fight another day, I guess? Yeah,
that's something I struggled with for a long time. I fished a lot of tournaments on big water, and they're hard to keep alive. They're not like largemouth. They're huge pussies. and you can beat them up in a heartbeat, and they're done. Like they can look fine in 5 minutes. You can go for a 5-minute run, and 3 of them are dead. And I've seen it. I fished Canadian Opens where it was almost a thing where I just accepted I was going to have a couple dead every day.
Wow.
And it's just unacceptable. I see it all the time now. It's been years ago I learned the system, and it's been completely flawless. Since I've learned this thing, I have never killed one.
Oh, wow.
And it's so easy. It's so easy. So what I do is first thing in the morning, I run a Ranger 520C. So it's got the live wells are like a shared live well with just a divider in the middle, right?
Divider. Yep.
So what I do is I take one of the sides, the cone or side, doesn't really matter. And first thing in the morning, I fill that one side completely right to the lid with ice.
Okay.
I put my live wells on recirc so that it closes that valve, so no water as soon as I launch my boat, no water's coming into my boat. And then I just leave it like that until I get to my first place. When I get to my first place, I immediately fill my live wells. Right? And I want to make sure that water is as high as I can get it, but I want that sprayer to still be shooting down into the water so it'll oxygenate the water. You make a huge mistake by filling that thing right to the lid, and they think it's going to keep that water from sloshing around. Yeah, I guess it might do that, but also it's not allowing all the stuff from the
recirc pump. Yeah,
it's not allowing the water to shoot back in and recirc reoxygenate that water, but it's also not allowing the stuff from their piss and everything to evaporate out. And there's no air gap. You need that air gap there. That's why you see a lot of those guys running that little vent hole thing in the top of their live wells.
Yeah. Do you run that?
No, I don't, but I would recommend it. I just
really. So that's a good point.
That gas comes up through the water and then is in that air. If you don't open your live well lids and stuff, it'll eventually kill those fish. Eventually.
Wow.
So that's you want that gap for that reason, for the gases to escape, and also so that pump can shoot down in and oxygenate the water. So now that I've got to my first spot, I've got my ice on my one side. I filled it up to the top, left enough gap so the recirc pump can shoot in, and I leave it on. As soon as I fill it up to that level, I plug my overflow, and then I put it on recirc, and I keep that same water all day long. And I usually take typically 10 bags of ice with me every day. And I use all 10 every time. Wow. If you're getting 3-4 bags of ice, no good. Like some days, if it's really hot, I'll take 12, 13 bags. Now, some days I don't use them all, but most days I do. To me, it's probably, I just kind of stick my hand in the water every once in a while. You want it cold. I've never found that you can ice those fish out. The colder it is, the more they seem to like it. I've never had an issue. Like they all, at the end of the day, I can beat them up in 6-footers, do whatever, and they all look like I just caught them in 5 feet of water 10 minutes ago when I come into the weigh-in.
So I assume you have some sort of either a cooler built in the boat or a cooler that you're bringing along. That's what you would recommend if someone doesn't have a cooler, to actually have a separate cooler for that ice. Is it just gas station ice?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And you can do whatever.
Are you taking it out of the bags, or are you leaving it in the bag?
I just leave it in the bag. I've heard people say the chlorine that they use to make the ice and all that stuff in the water, and I've never had any issues with that stuff. I've gone to the pet store and got the aquarium stuff to change the pH and all that stuff, but like for fish tanks. But no, as long as it's cold, that's like, I mean, really better. I had it in August, and you go into cull a fish, you reach in there, and then you got your arms under your
right
back up because it's that cold. And I've never seen any ill effects from icing them down that hard.
So I'm right on board with you, but I'm learning something new here. I'm a 1 or 2 bag ice guy, and I was always like, it's done by like your first bag's done, and then you go dump your second, and then you got 3-4 hours left and a ride back in, and then staging right in a bay.
You're sitting there for an hour and a half waiting to weigh in, and I minimum, like, even if it's a cooler day, I'll go 8 bags.
Gotcha.
Minimum.
Wow, good to know. Well,
and it's kind of like once an hour, you dump a 3/4 of a bag in or a bag in. You don't want a temperature difference, and that's why you don't pump any new water in ever. You keep that same water so you're not, because if you're pumping new water in, you're just constantly changing the temperature up, and that's no good. And fizzing is major.
So are you I guess down the gullet in the mouth, or are you down the side pectoral fins and going kind of the right way? Yeah.
Through the side is the right way. Yeah. If you're going through the mouth, then you're playing with fire there, because you're going past all their organs, their brain, or everything. I mean, it's crazy.
I hate to admit it, years ago when we first learned about fizzing and how important it is, to me, that seemed like the easy route. You look for that little star in the back or whatever in the crushers, and I had a handful of dead fish, man. It felt terrible, probably because I poked something I shouldn't have. And it's a little more scarier, you think, going down in the body. But there's a lot of good information. We're going to try to send some links here in the description as well to help you become a better fizzer, because, a lot of these people that are watching this podcast and listening to it on the YouTube channel are thinking about maybe fishing tournaments or starting to fish the Great Lakes or deeper bodies of water, regardless of where you are in the country, and want to learn a little bit more about fish care. And fizzing is really, really the difference in everything. Those fish will just get beat up. They're literally, if you don't know what we're talking about, they're floating on their sides because of the air bladder. They can't go down by themselves. Now, I found that, maybe you know more about this than I do, but if I catch a fish right away, it seems like they'll go back down and hopefully survive. But there's something about keeping them up out of the water for a certain period of time. And what that time frame is, I don't know. I think there's a fine line. But at some point, that fish isn't going to be able to get back down. And I've seen that a lot when you put that fish in a live well to get that picture, right? Set him in the water and release it, and he's just sitting up there floating around. There's a seagull up there waiting for him to die so he can go chew out his eyeballs. I mean, that's just that's what we see out there. So
yeah, if you catch one, let him go right away. If you want a quick picture, be very fast, because the longer you keep them out, the better chance you're gonna have to fizz them. And if you're not fizzing a fish that anything deeper than about 20 foot, there's a good chance he's gonna have to be fizzed. If you're releasing that fish immediately, probably not gonna have to fizz it. If you put it in your live well or take too long taking pictures, you're probably gonna have to fizz that fish. And if he needs to be fizzed and you don't fizz him, you've just killed that fish. Yeah. You need to fizz those fish. They will not eventually go down. They will not.
So somebody, either yourself or the tournament organization, when you do bring them in, somebody has to do it there. Otherwise, that fish will die. So you're killing a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old fish.
There was a tournament a couple of years ago, and I was out at Main Duck on Lake Ontario, and I broke down out there. And there was a bunch of boats fishing a school, and I eventually was on my way towards the island waiting for the Coast Guard to give me a tow. And I kind of went past where that, it was check-in time. They'd all gone in. And I went past that area where all those boats had been fishing, and there was 40, 50, I don't know how many, 3.5 to 5, to 4.25, 4.5 pound smallmouth floating through the whole area. And I went over thinking, okay, I'll just scoop them all up, stick them all, let them go down. Well, the seagulls had already got them all their eyes, their gills, everything were gone. And it was just because these guys were pulling them out and not taking the time to fizz them. And the other thing I want to mention too is those fin clips. Those are no good. Just fizz the fish. That's not going to do anything. It'll keep them, make you feel better, because it'll pin them to the bone. But that's really all it's doing. There's not enough pressure change in that, what is your live well, 1.5 foot deep?
Yeah.
There's not enough pressure change there to really do anything to those fish. So you're just kind of making yourself feel better because they're not floating in your live well anymore.
Do you use, and it takes a little bit of practice, watch a bunch of videos before you go out there and test it in real life. There's a bunch of people up there. Barb is one of the ladies that on the U.S. side that helps out a lot of these organizations that will take the time to teach you how to properly fizz a fish, which is important. Obviously, knowing what we know now, it's almost standard. If you're going to go out there and fish deep water and keep that fish, you got to have some type of fizzing device, and it's very inexpensive and super easy once you get.
It's so easy. I've had so many co-anglers that were freaked out by it, and I show them like once, and they're good. It's so easy. I sent you that link to Bruce Tuft's video. He's a fisheries biologist at Queen's University. Probably knows more about smallmouth bass than anyone in the world. biologically, right? And that's all he does is study the fish out in Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence. And so I give you that link to his little fizzing video, and it's super easy. Just lay the pectoral fin down. And I mean, I've seen guys just that here, you've never done it before, take a needle and try it. Because I know they're not going to kill the fish, even if they miss it 3-4 times. I've never killed one fizzing it through the side like that. So, I mean, don't be scared. I've seen guys that won't fizz because they're scared that they'll kill it.
Yes, I can see that.
You won't kill a fish if you don't fizz it. So you're better off stabbing away, in my opinion.
Okay.
You know,
do you use any?
Times, oh well, you'll get it the 4th time, you know. Yeah. But at least you're giving that fish a chance. If you just let him float, he's got no chance. He's bird food.
Are you using any type of additives or anything to the water? I know there's a bunch on the market. I don't know if that works or not, but
I've got a bunch of G juice in my boat, but I mean that's kind of
you don't really use that.
Okay. Years I've never really had to use it, and I don't. Another thing, if you do use that stuff and you're shooting that water down and it starts foaming up, get it out of there. Get it out of there, because that's I'm pretty sure most of that is like the ammonia and everything up from the fish's pee and everything, and that's not good. And I actually carry like a little kitchen strainer in the back of my boat. If I ever do use that stuff, that I can scoop it out very easily and not, have it all over your hand. Right? So
you use like a strainer that you'll scoop it.
Little small like kitchen strainer, kind of like a small.
Yeah, dude, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I always like, man, that stuff foamed up pretty good in there. Whether it's because I use too much or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful little thing to have in the back of your boat for those days.
But it sounds like if you keep that water temp cold and you fizz your smallmouth, you shouldn't have any problems.
No. Yeah. And the biggest thing is make sure you so when I say I catch a 5-pounder, right? I put it in the live well, I go back to fishing for 2 to 5 minutes. If it's a big one, you can't wait more than 5 minutes, especially if the deeper it is, the faster you have to do it too, because the pressure buildup is much greater in 40 feet than it is in 20 foot.
Okay.
So wait no longer than 5 minutes. The reason I don't do it right away is I like to let them kind of bloat up fully before I do it. I don't want to have to fizz that fish twice. I don't want to do it right away and then come back and go 20 minutes later and go, he's floating again. What the heck, and have to do it again. So I can 5 minutes kind of max. And then I go fizz that fish. And he's good for the rest of the day. He's in that cold water. I have no worries. I haven't killed one since I started using that ice system. And I mean, it's heavy ice. But I mean,
it is.
Guys are cheap, 'cause let's face it, ice isn't that cheap every day to have to go and get 10, 12 ice, right?
Yeah,
Nobody wants that extra expense. But I mean, what it can save you in tournament winnings and stuff is crazy. You have $100,000 boats and rigged with these electronics and I mean, what's 10 bags of ice, right? Like, I mean, I don't know if you remember Justin Lucas a few years ago, Thousand Islands. I think he lost the Elite Series because he didn't fizz. And it could have cost him Angler of the Year.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary. Are you using call tags? And if so, which kind?
That's kind of a heated debate.
I know. So what's your theory about that?
At all on smallmouth. And the reason I say it's kind of a heated debate is I do not like I like the puncture style.
I do too.
Yeah,
I'm right there. All these organizations, some local organizations that are forcing you to put the non-punctured big plastic clip on their jaw.
The bigger that plastic is for that clip it's terrible for smallmouth. That old thing will kill a smallmouth.
I'm right with you on that, but like you said, that is a very controversial topic. Because you're gonna have guys that are like, oh, I never kill a fish with those plastic clips. They're the best. They're safe. Man, I've seen it firsthand. I've killed fish with those plastic clips. I've seen it.
I don't put a call tag on them unless I have to, and I use the puncture when legal to do it. And because obviously some tournament organizations don't want you using them. And I mean, we've all seen that big slit that starts down here and goes.
Well, you have to do it. Yeah, there's a technique to do it correctly.
Right against the bone, and I can show you one of my fish that's been punctured, and I bet you can't find the hole because it's right against the jawbone, right? And there's no slippage at all. My problem, other than those big conservation clips, non-puncture ones, are so bulky that they will kill smallmouth. They seem to be fine on the largemouth. The other thing is every time I've tried to use those things, and I don't carry a scale, I'm a balance beam. Every time I put them up on the beam, they're falling off. Especially when you're getting 4.5 pound fish and you're trying to beam them, they're falling off. So how good is that for a fish if he's falling 2 feet down and hitting his head on the carpet, and then he's rolling around losing all the slime coat on the blazing hot carpet? There's a lot of, I don't know. I just puncture him and don't worry about it, right? And then plus he's falling off and he's out of the water longer. There's a lot of downsides to it, right? Yes, you're not putting a hole in the fish's mouth, but I think that it's probably healthier for the fish just to have a tiny little puncture. It'll heal. It's no bigger than a hook hole.
Yeah. No,
if not really. So
right on board. So the theme here is go catch big 5 and 6 pounders, so you don't have to worry about putting a tag in their mouth, and you're good to go. And it's easy, especially on the Great Lakes, guys. You got to remember, you fill your live well up. That's crystal clear water. Okay, you can look in your live well with 5 fish, and you can kind of judge it at some point. Later on the day, that's when I'll find myself sometimes with the 2 or 3 that might be in that 3.5, 4 pound range, and they're pretty close. Maybe putting a tag on them. I went with, because of, we're forced down here, especially on the Chesapeake where I fish a lot for largemouth, we have to have those non-punctured clips. So that's what I carry in the boat. The ones I had issues with in the past were the bigger ones. I went down to a smaller one. I still have that. I'm still always nervous when I clip a smallmouth. But that's real good stuff to know. Based off of your experience, not having a lot of fish kills in recent memory, we're going to definitely take note, use a lot more ice, maybe mess around with some chemical additives, but just watch that, be careful. And then, of course, just the fizzing's the most important. And doing it. It's so hard when you're on a big group of fish. You know that.
Yeah, but if you're catching them in like 40, you better fizz them, or they won't last. They just won't. You can go ahead and 50, I guarantee you won't keep them alive all day if you don't fizz them. So
how about the ride in? Some days, of course, it's flat calm, and we're back at the tournament, no problems. Other days, it's 4, 5, 6 footers out there, and those fish are definitely taking a pounding. I stop quite a bit, probably more than most. Let that water fill back up. Now, you mentioned do you fill back up on your runs, or do you keep that? You just monitor it?
Yeah, I just kind of slow down a little bit and crack the lid, take a look. But I've got the overflow plugged all day, so
it's fine. You don't lose water. You don't lose water.
No, I shouldn't. But you know what I mean? It's always a good idea to crack that. Like, Great Lakes, when it's rough, fast is 30 miles an hour. Like, that to me is like flying around out there. So if you slow down, you're doing 25 or something, you slow down to 15, you just kind of crack the lid, look back, okay, the water's still good. It's a good idea to check up on them, but you shouldn't be losing any if you've got it plugged and everything. So.
Man, no, this was some good information here. We're getting close on the time limit. I again want to thank you for bringing a little bit of different perspective when it comes to these podcasts. Fish care. I mean, why not? That's probably one of the most important parts of everything we do. It's the reason why we can do what we do, is because there's fish to be caught. And without these ways of preserving that resource, who knows what's going to happen? It's scary what can happen. We've seen in a lot of bodies of water where the fishing just deteriorated because of overkill and overharvest. And of course, as a tournament angler, fish care is very important, not only because we want to do well in the event, but we like catching those big fish in the future and letting everyone else sharing that experience as well. Seriously, Curtis, thank you for shedding some light on that subject. A couple things I want to talk to you about before we let you go, because I always ask every guest on the show. I got to do this to you. I'm gonna say you can only use one bait the rest of the year. One bait only to catch smallmouth. I don't care how you rig it, but it's only one bait. What bait are you going to choose for that year?
It's hard not to say a drop shot.
So some type of drop shot bait, but we got to get specific. I need to know exactly.
Well, I've got a bait that I've made years ago. actually with Ben Parker.
Mm-hmm.
We made that big giant, ledge spoon.
Yeah.
Me and him, he had a mold made for me years ago, and we were going to put it out under another company, and things fell through, and I've just been using that for a while.
So a little sneaky special.
Just an irregular kind of drop shot bait. It's a little different than most.
Uh-huh.
But that's the bait I'd be using.
Okay. Perfect.
Small 3-inch finesse drop shot bait.
Finesse drop shot bait. All right. So then we're going to take it one step further. You're hand pouring or you're making your own baits. A little sneaky 3-inch deal. I'm only going to give you one color then. What are you going to make?
Green pumpkin.
Green pumpkin. Of course. Yeah. Why wouldn't you, right? It's the perfect it's the perfect color if you're ever lost and you have no idea what color you should be throwing. Green pumpkin's a good choice to start with, at least anyways. Good stuff. What's your personal best smallmouth? What's your biggest you ever caught?
I don't really know exactly, but I don't carry a scale, so unless it's early spring, the Champlain, bedfish tournament kind of deals. That's the only time I'll ever have a scale about. But a bunch of years ago, I caught a big one on Lake Simcoe in the tournament. It was 7 something. I don't know.
Sure.
It didn't even win big fish, so I kind of forgot about it. So yeah,
all day long you're thinking, "Yep, I probably got big fish." And
I want to say it was 7.5, something like that.
Wow.
And somebody ended up bringing it. So
crazy. Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think there's for state record, it'd be U.S. waters, New York. I don't know what the Canadian record would be, but do you think there's a state record living on Lake Ontario right now?
Probably.
Yeah.
Canadian record's 9.5, I believe. So.
Oh, wow.
Simcoe definitely has it.
You think Simcoe does? Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely Canadian records in Simcoe for sure. Lake Ontario, probably. Yeah.
Wow.
Crazy, I mean, when you're 8 out there, there's got to be some 9s, right?
Yeah. What lake did that 7.5? Was that Simcoe, you said?
Yeah, that was Simcoe. And it was, I don't fish that lake very often. I don't like it. It's got giants in it. It's hard to catch them most of the year.
That's what I'm hearing. You hear all these big bags.
Yeah. But I mean, usually there used to be a Bass Pro Shops tournament out there every fall. And I mean, if you caught 5, you had 26 to 30 pounds, but only a handful of guys would have a limit, right? So they're big ones when you catch them, but they're difficult to catch. Last time I fished out there, I was on a big school and could barely catch any. They're very finicky and but they're giants. It's kind of cool. And that big one I caught it out of I think 72 feet of water, which was kind of different. That's one of the deeper ones I've ever caught.
Yeah, that's a deep smallmouth.
Yeah,
better fizz them, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, good stuff, man. Curtis, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. How can people follow you if they want to keep up with what you're doing as far as social media, things like that?
Instagram is basically all I use. Just Curtis Richardson. It's _Curtis_Richardson. Also, I do some hand-tied jigs, like flip jigs, that kind of stuff. That's also probably where my bait's going to be. The drop shot bait's going to be coming out soon.
Okay.
That's that GLP tackle on Instagram. GLP, it's Great Lakes Premium Tackle.
Okay. Yeah.
It's GLP tackle. And then I also I'm guiding now also on Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River.
Sweet. Yeah.
Thousand Islands fishing charters on Instagram.
Very good. Yeah, we're going to put all that information will be in the show notes here in the description of the video. And I'm also going to link a little bit of information when it comes to fish care as well. So you guys are interested in learning a little bit more about that. Don't forget to check out those links. Follow along as man, I can't wait to have your drop shot baits come out. So I'll be checking that out for sure. Again, Curtis, thanks for joining us. As always, you're always welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. And I'll probably run into you, I'm sure, this year at the Northern Open, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We'll be there. Sounds good. And as always, guys, until next time, we'll see you on the water.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.